Hi guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another Retro Adventures. And at the end of another week, and the end of another poll, we've got a very clear winner with the Isle of Dread for Dungeons & Dragons. Now we'll cover that on the desktop in a wee second, and as usual I'll be back at the end of the video with some other poll related stuff and some other channel related stuff. But a wee reminder that if you'd like to help the channel out, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, or you'd like to become a real honest to goodness fake Laird of Scotland, then we've got a Patreon in the description down below. So if you check that out and see how you can help, it'd be very much appreciated. Anyway, let's have a look at the Isle of Dread. So, this is the Isle of Dread. It's module number X1 for Dungeons & Dragons, came out from TSR in 1981, and in fact was bundled with the Expert set itself. Now, this is an introduction to adventuring outside the dungeon. The basic set of Dungeons & Dragons basically focused on the dungeons part of the name, where adventurers would just go into a dungeon, they're seeking the lost treasure of the wizard Ekbanar or whatever, they're fighting monsters, they're doing random encounters in corridors, and there's various locations where they will discover certain things. This takes that format into the outside world, or the Expert set took that format, where you're exploring, you're going through jungles, you're getting random encounters there, but there are certain set locations such as villages, towns, castles, etc. Now, Isle of Dread takes that into a hex crawl format. So basically it provides you with a hexagonal map made up of little hexagons, and each one of those allows you to explore. There's a random chance of an encounter in those, but certain ones are set up, like towns, cities, etc. Now, the adventure itself is very linear. It's a very simple one. The players find a letter, and it tells them about the Isle of Dread. It provides them with a basic map of where the island is and the outsides of it, and they get to go and explore it. So they're getting to explore whatever's on the island until they eventually find the treasure talked of in the letter, and that's the adventure over. Although, because it's such a big location, there's a few other ideas for different adventures you could have in the same location. But let's have a look at the back of the book. The Isle of Dread by David Cook and Tom Moldvay. Hundreds of miles from the mainland, surrounded by dangerous waters, lies an island known only as the Isle of Dread. Dark jungles and treacherous swamps await those who are brave enough to travel inland in search of the lost plateau, where the ruins of a once mighty civilization hold many treasures and many secrets. The Isle of Dread is the first in a series of adventures for use with the D&D Expert rules. The module is designed as an instructional aid to help novice dungeon masters design their own wilderness adventures. Including the module are 13 maps of the island, 16 new monsters, and suggestions for further adventures on the Isle of Dread. A special content map complete with background information is also included. So that's kind of where it starts. If we look inside, first of all we've got the handout with the letter. So this is a letter from an adventurer from 30, 50 years before the players start off, who had located the Isle of Dread, and it talks about the fantastic treasure within it. And on the other side is the basic map he created of the Isle of Dread. He only sailed round it, so he mapped the outside of the island, the mountains and things, but he never really journeyed onto the inside. He only heard the rumours of it, which the players will now follow up on. And of course the players can fill this out as they explore further. One of the major things it provides is this map of the mainland. And way down here is the Isle of Dread. So that's the big long siege voyage they will have to make. We provide with a map of a pirate lair, which is on one of the island beaches. We've got general cave lairs, Rakasta camps, different encounters within it. We've got a map of the island itself. So the adventure lies in the format of you discover about the island, you travel there, you encounter the outside of the island, you explore the inside of the island, you find the central plateau. In the center of the central plateau is a volcano. Inside the volcano is a lake. On the lake is an island. On the island is a temple, and in the temple is the treasure. So it's an onion skin of encounters. If you're traveling straight there, you're just going into the different layers until you reach the center where the treasure is. There are different things, so like this is the village of Mantru, which is on the edge of the lake. We've got different locations marked on the map where different things happen. Map 9, Fanaton Settlement, the village of Tanaroa, which is one of the coastal villages which the players are likely to encounter first. And then we've got the booklet itself. Now, we've got the preface here, table of contents, preparing for the adventure, because again, this is a very early adventure, so we're talking to dungeon masters and prepping them far more than we would with a normal adventure. And then we've got beginning the adventure. Well, this details the continent. Now, over the years, this has picked up a fair amount of criticism because, for example, we've got one of the ones here, the Heldan freeholds. The Heldan are barbaric, fair-haired people. Their culture is very similar to medieval Iceland. So they're kind of Vikings. And then we've got ones here which is, this culture is similar to the horsemen of the Central Asian steppes, Huns, Mongols, Magyars, Turks, etc. So these are very much cliches. The Five Shires, homeland of the halflings, etc., etc. These are very much cliches, but you're setting up an entire continent which your dungeon masters can flesh out in the future on only 2 pages. You know, there are, I've heard from different people, years of campaigning here in just the start of the adventure, because this is what they based their campaigns on, because they had nothing else. It's a campaign setting in 2 pages. So it addressing what the cultures are like in very broad strokes by comparing them to real world cultures doesn't seem a bad thing at all to me. You're setting things up as easy as you can. You don't have the space for going into absolute details about everything. But we've got the finding the scrolls, so the map and the letter. And then we're on to beginning the adventure, and it talks you through preparing to set sail, because this is going to be a long sea journey. We've got wandering monsters once we get onto the island, because different area of the islands have different wandering monster tables. But every time you move a hex, there's going to be a chance of you encountering something. And then we've got the general island encounters. So these are set ones. So while you have wandering monsters when you're between things, as we showed on the map, there's various encounters which you will travel to. So as the village of Tanaroa, basically one of the coastal villages, which kind of sets you up. Now, this is another area of the adventure which kind of got criticised, that these are a bit racist, where this is a island filled with possible cannibals, etc. And it's being a bit racist to island cultures. But again, it's playing into stereotypes. And to tell the truth, although the villagers do have a zombie master amongst them, or zombie mistress if you want to be not engendered about it, but these are kind of the good guys. They're living on the edge of a very savage island and doing their best to survive. And they're the ones that the players can deal with the best. You know, they can trade with them. These are the friendly people. Whereas on the inside of the island are the monsters. There are various throwbacks to an older age. Because this is very much set up like Skull Island from the King Kong movies. This is a mysterious island with savage villagers on the outside who can be befriended, but on the inside of the island there are prehistoric monsters, there are Neanderthals, etc., which are more monsters to be dealt with. So we've got different locations around the island: Crocodile Bay, Lair of the Sea Snakes, the Lair of the Water Termite, the Pirate Lair, which we saw the map of on one of the outer islands, and various places within it. So there's towers, boats, huts, there's a cave, an escape tunnel. Then we're on to the Recasta camp, which likewise is broken down into different locations. So there's tents, pavilions, a fire pit, a Fanaton settlement, which is broken down as well. There's huts, yet more huts, other platforms, Lair of the Lizard Men. So these are locations within it, Aranea layers, and then we've got more simple ones. So Pteranodon lair, or peril, Dimetrodon peril, deranged Ankylosaurus, lair of the wretched troglodytes, Plesiosaurus menace. Different encounters with dinosaurs, different encounters with more ancient creatures, because this is the Lost World. And then when you reach the central plateau, it's got its own Wandering Monsters tables and different encounters here. So there's a gold vein, treant forest, the cliff wall, the village of Mantru. Because the plateau is on a much higher level, the monster encounters are different, because the jungle below the plateau is tropical, whereas the plateau itself is more temperate because it's higher up, the weather's a little bit cooler. We've got the Taboo Island, so the island in the centre of the lake, in the centre of the volcano, in the centre of the plateau, in the centre of the island, is where you're going to be finally reaching, and it talks you through the main areas in that. Because if I go to the cover again, we can see that it maps out level 1, 2, and 3 of Taboo Island, the different encounters you have within the temple. And we detail out the rooms of that, fire traps, priest chambers, rat lairs, the Kopru, who are a heat-loving creature which live inside the heated springs in the volcano, but they have mind control powers. These are the big villains of the adventure, which seems a little weird given how powerful they are to take control of players, that they haven't ventured outside. They are just kept within. It would have been nice if there were some schemes where these were trying to take control of the island, or we discovered more. But this is very broad strokes. The DM can flesh that out as they wish. And then we got into the appendix, where it's giving you alternate scenarios. So as well as going after the treasure inside the temple, you can be trying to destroy the zombie master. You can be trying to map the island and sell that information off. You can be on a dinosaur hunt. You know, somebody wants part of a particular dinosaur. Perhaps a wizard needs it for one of his spells. You can be sent there to exterminate the pirates, to bring back people alive, to search for a sunken treasure. We've got different encounters, because the humans might not be the only, or the players might not be the only heroes exploring this island. So there can be other encounters, wandering human parties, a fighter, 4th level, a magic user, male 1st level with charm person spell. Party 2 has a female fighter wearing plate mail +1 and a warhammer +1. Sample native groups, so we've got the matriarchs, the tribal war leaders. And then we've got all these new monsters, Allosaurus, Ankylosaurus, Aranea, Brontosaurus, Dimetrodons, giant elks, Kopru, Megatherium. We've got the natives, we've got giant oysters, Phanatons, Swordbeak, Plesiosauruses, and Ricasta and Trachodons. So lots of new monsters to flesh out the game. Now, the Isle of Dread, while being a fairly simple adventure itself, is absolutely massive in its scope of play. Me and my group have been playing through the Isle of Dread for about the past 6 months. About 33-hour sessions have gone into this. So we've had about 90 hours of play out of this adventure. Okay, it's the Goodman's Games version, which is the updated 5th edition, which has a lot of extra encounters, has a lot more things fleshed out, a lot more role-playing put into it. But a skilled dungeon master, or even a fairly basic dungeon master with some imagination, can take this and just add so much, because it's a huge environment for the players to explore, including a massive setting at the start, basically the foundations of a campaign. The Isle of Dread, while being one of the early adventures, really is a lesson on how to set things up for your world. An absolutely fantastic adventure, and definitely worthwhile of a look, especially if you go to one of the newer versions of it to get it updated for 5th edition. But you could certainly convert an older version with a fair amount of ease. So that was the Isle of Dread, and that won the poll this week on 31% of the vote. ahead of the second place one, which was Mercurial for Shadowrun on 22% of the vote, which was one I actually hoped would win. Because you see, as I mentioned in the review of the book there, me and my group are still playing through the Isle of Dread. So when it started to win the poll, I actually had to contact my Dungeon Master and say, does it matter if I read the adventure to cover it? And he was like, it's all right, we're playing the Goodman's game version, which is new, and we've covered all the material in the original book. So you can read it, you know, go fill your boots, you'll be absolutely fine. But I was really hoping that Mercurial would win, or even Mass of Nalhatep, which is a more chunky book and an absolute classic campaign. I thought I was putting Isle of Dread in there to fulfill having some Dungeons & Dragons stuff, to have some fantasy in the poll. But you just went and voted for it, and meant I had to go to my Dungeon Master on the beg and, is it alright to cover it? And he was fine with it. Anyway, as I said, Mercurial came second on 22% of the vote. Mass of Nalhatep for Call of Cthulhu came third on 20% of the vote. Behind that was the ISIS Coordinates for the Star Wars role-playing game on 18% of the vote. And in final place was Slaughter Margin for Judge Dredd on only 10% of the vote, which is really missing a great thing, because Slaughter Margin is a big chunky box with loads of maps and an absolutely great adventure for the classic Judge Dredd game. But we'll get to it eventually. Now, clearing all those off, we're back to a retro RPG poll. And I seem to have gone fairly concurrent in years, except for the last one. So, in 1994 was the Fianna sourcebook for Werewolf the Apocalypse. Absolutely great sourcebook with a comic book at the start, fleshing out one of the tribes for Werewolf the Apocalypse. Then in 1995, we've got Awakenings, a sourcebook for Shadowrun with various magical threats and how magic has changed beyond the Grimoire, which came out first of all. Then we've got Capital, Pride and Profit for Mutant Chronicles in 1996, fleshing out one of the corporations that rules that universe, fighting off the demons which are trying to take over. 1997, we've got Kraken's Threat Dossier for Star Wars by West End Games. Absolute fantastic book with other threats in it, as detailed by the head of Rebel Intelligence. A character that was used a lot in books, but fleshes this out fantastically with some personal comments. Would love to cover that. But in the fifth place, we've got Spycraft from 2002. So we had 1994, 1995, 1996, 1997, and then 2002. Broke my rhythm. Now, Spycraft is a standalone role-playing game using the D20 rules under the OGL, which is a bit controversial at the moment. But it's a great game and I'd like to have a look at it. Another channel-related stuff, there's some chat going on the Discord channel. Come and join us. The link's in the description down below if you'd like to join in and we can have a chat about various things. We've been discussing various role-playing games, especially with all the controversy going around about the OGL and people wanting to move away from Dungeons & Dragons. We're also discussing possible things I might put into the poll and might cover on the channel in the future. So come join us, come check it out. We'd love to see you there. Anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough as usual, so thank you very much for watching. But most of all, as always, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.